The human ship moved slowly through space toward the crystal planet. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge and watched the world grow larger on the screen. It looked like a giant diamond floating in the darkness, beautiful and cold. "Sir, we're getting their signal," said Lieutenant Amy Davis from her station. "They want us to follow their ships to the landing area." Jake nodded. He had been waiting for this moment for 3 years. First contact with the Xanathari Empire, the most powerful alien race in the galaxy. They ruled over hundreds of worlds and thousands of different species. Now they were finally meeting humans. "Tell Dr. Crawford and Commander Blake to get ready," Jake said. "We land in 1 hour." The crystal ships that guided them were unlike anything humans had ever built. They seemed to sing as they moved through space. The sound came through the radio and made everyone on the bridge feel strange. Some of the crew looked worried. Jake just watched and learned. Dr. Lisa Crawford joined Jake on the bridge. She was the team's expert on alien life. Her job was to study how the Xanathari lived and thought. She had spent years reading everything they could find about this race. "Captain, the reports say they communicate with their minds," Lisa said. "They can also change colors on their skin to show feelings, like how humans smile or frown." "What else should I know?" Jake asked. "They think they're better than everyone else. Every species they've met has joined their empire without a fight. They expect us to do the same." Commander Ryan Blake walked up to them. He was the team's specialist in alien cultures. His job was to help Jake avoid making mistakes that could start a war. "The princess we're meeting is named Lyralee," Ryan said. "She's over 200 years old but still young for her people. She's never dealt with a species that didn't immediately bow down to them." Jake smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Then this should be interesting." The landing was smooth. The human ship touched down on a platform made of crystal that rang like a bell. Outside, Jake could see tall spires reaching into the purple sky. Everything was made of crystal or metal that shined like mirrors. It was beautiful, but it felt cold. Jake led his team of 12 humans down the ramp. They all wore their best uniforms, but Jake had made sure they also wore their weapons. The Xanathari might be peaceful, but Jake believed in being ready for anything. The aliens were waiting for them. Jake had seen pictures, but meeting them in person was different. They looked like humans made of living crystal. Their skin was clear like glass, and lights moved under it in patterns. They were tall and thin, and they moved like dancers. The one in front had to be the princess. She wore a crown made of crystal that floated above her head without touching it. Her skin glowed with soft blue light, and when she moved, it was like watching water flow. "Welcome, humans," she said. Her voice came into their heads without using their ears. It felt strange, like someone whispering inside their minds. "I am Princess Lyralee Vashitar, heir to the Xanathari throne." "You may approach." Jake walked forward. He didn't bow or kneel like she seemed to expect. He just looked at her with steady eyes. Behind him, his team stayed alert and ready. "Princess," Jake said out loud, "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. We represent Earth and humanity. Thank you for meeting with us." Something changed in the princess's face. The lights under her crystal skin flickered in a way that seemed confused. She had expected him to be amazed by her beauty and power. Instead, he was studying her like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "You speak with sound instead of mind touch," she said. "How primitive, but you will learn our ways soon enough." "We'll see," Jake said. The princess felt something she had never felt before. A small shake ran through her crystal body. It lasted only a second, but it was there. She didn't understand what it meant. "Come," she said, trying to sound confident again. "We will show you the palace. You will see the glory of the Xanathari Empire." As they walked through corridors made of singing crystal, Jake's eyes moved constantly. He looked at everything. The guards, the weapons, the exits, the structure of the walls. Lisa Crawford noticed how the princess kept glancing at their captain. The alien seemed nervous, though she was trying to hide it. The throne room was massive. The ceiling was so high it disappeared in blue light. Hundreds of aliens watched from galleries carved into the crystal walls. All their skin lights were flashing in patterns that Lisa couldn't understand yet. The emperor sat on a throne made of a single giant crystal. He was ancient even by their standards. His skin was almost white, and the lights under it moved slowly like old lightning. "So," the emperor said, his mind voice echoing in their heads, "these are the humans we have heard whispers about. You come from a small world at the edge of our territory." "We come in peace," Jake said. "We want to learn about your people and share knowledge." The emperor's laugh felt like ice in their minds. "Share, young species, you misunderstand your position. You will join our empire, like all the others. In time, you will be grateful for our guidance. Jake's expression didn't change. We'll have to discuss that with our government. The princess felt that strange shaking again. The human wasn't afraid. He wasn't impressed. When he looked at her, it wasn't with worship or even respect. It was something else. Something that made her crystal form tremble in ways she didn't understand. Dr. Crawford stepped forward. Your Majesty, we're honored to meet you. Perhaps we could start with smaller exchanges. Our biologist would love to learn about your fascinating biology, and our engineer could share some of our technology. Technology? The Emperor seemed amused. What could a young species like yours possibly teach us? Commander Blake smiled. You might be surprised, Your Majesty. Humans have a unique way of solving problems. The princess watched Jake Morrison throughout the conversation. He never stopped looking around the room. His eyes moved from guard to guard, from weapon to weapon, from exit to exit. It was like he was building a map in his mind. But a map for what? When their eyes met, she felt that trembling again. Stronger this time. There was something in his gaze that she couldn't name. It wasn't hatred or fear or love. It was something older and deeper, something that made her body react without her permission. Why do you stare at me like that, human? She finally asked, the words coming out before she could stop them. Jake tilted his head slightly. Like what, princess? She couldn't answer. She didn't have words for what she saw in his eyes. All she knew was that for the first time in her long life, Princess Lyrale Vashitar felt like prey. The meeting ended with plans for more talks the next day. As the humans were led to their guest quarters, the princess stood alone in the throne room. The shaking in her crystal body had stopped, but the memory of it remained. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong, and she was starting to think it had nothing to do with the humans being primitive or weak. It had everything to do with them being something else entirely. Dr. Lisa Crawford woke up early in their crystal guest rooms. She couldn't sleep well. The walls sang softly all night, and the sound made her dream strange. She got dressed and started working on her notes about the Zenithari. The aliens were fascinating. Their bodies were made of a living crystal that could change and move like flesh. They lived much longer than humans and had powers that seemed like magic. But as Lisa studied them more, she started to see patterns that worried her. Jake, she said when the captain joined her for breakfast, I need to tell you something important. Jake sat down with his coffee. Around them, the other team members were getting ready for the day. Tony Rodriguez was already taking apart a crystal device to see how it worked. Amanda Price was reading reports about Zenithari trade agreements. What did you find? Jake asked. They're not really predators, Lisa said quietly. I mean, they rule the galaxy, but they never had to fight for survival like we did. Their world was easy. No big dangerous animals, no ice ages, no disasters that killed most of the life. Jake's eyes got sharper. Go on. They evolved to control their environment, not to survive in it. They learned to use their crystal biology to change matter and energy. That made them powerful, but it also made them soft. They've never met a species that could really threaten them. And we can, Lisa nodded. Jake, compared to them, we're monsters. We come from a world that tried to kill us for millions of years. We learned to hunt animals bigger and stronger than us. We learned to work together to bring down prey that could crush us individually. Our whole evolution is based on being predators. Jake smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. That explains a few things. Across the room, Tony Rodriguez called out, Captain, you need to see this. They walked over to where Tony had the crystal device spread out on a table. It looked like a flower made of light and glass. This is one of their basic tools, Tony said. It uses sound waves to change matter at the tiny level. It's amazing technology, but it has a huge weakness. What kind of weakness? Jake asked. It only works on things that are mostly crystal or metal. Organic matter with complex carbon chains, like human bodies. It barely affects us at all. Their weapons are designed to fight enemies made of crystal or simple metals. They've never needed to kill something made of meat and bone. Jake and Lisa looked at each other. This was important information. Keep studying it, Jake said. But be quiet about what you learn. Later that morning, Princess Lyrale came to escort them on a tour of the city. She had thought about the strange human captain all night. Something about him bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. Captain Morrison, she said as they walked through crystal gardens where light flowers grew. Tell me about your world. What would you like to know? Jake asked, is it peaceful? Beautiful like our world? Jake stopped walking and looked at her. Princess, my world is covered in the bones of dead species. Some died naturally. Some we killed because they were trying to kill us. Some we killed because we needed their land or their food. The princess felt that trembling start again. You killed them? When we had to, Jake said simply. That's how evolution works on Earth. The strong survive. The weak become food. Dr. Crawford joined the conversation. Princess, may I ask about your world's history? Have you ever had wars? Wars? The princess looked confused. Why would we fight each other? There has always been enough for everyone. When disagreements arise, the wisest minds find solutions. What about other species on your world? Amanda Price asked. Were there ever any that threatened you? Threatened us? The princess laughed, but it sounded nervous. We are the highest form of life. Nothing could threaten us. Jake stopped walking again. He turned to look at the princess directly. When their eyes met, she felt like something was crawling under her crystal skin. Princess, he said slowly. On our world, everything is a threat. The weather can kill you. The animals can kill you. Other humans can kill you. Even the plants can be poisonous. We learn to survive by being more dangerous than everything else. That sounds horrible, she whispered. It made us strong, Jake replied. That afternoon, they met with Xenothari military commanders. The aliens wanted to show off their weapons and soldiers. They brought the humans to a training ground where crystal warriors practiced with harmonic weapons. The Xenothari soldiers were impressive. They moved with perfect coordination, their weapons singing as they changed matter with sound. They could turn stone into dust or metal into gas. The demonstration was meant to show human visitors how powerful the Empire was. Instead, Jake watched with the eyes of a predator studying prey. Interesting, he said to Commander Blake. Their formations are beautiful, but they're not designed for real combat. What do you mean? Princess Lyra Lai asked. She had been watching Jake instead of the demonstration. They're performing, Jake explained, like a dance. They've never fought an enemy that doesn't follow their rules. The princess didn't understand, but something in his voice made her crystal body shake again. Nathan Cross, the team's security chief, asked to demonstrate human combat techniques. The Xenothari agreed, thinking it would be amusing to see primitive human methods. Nathan was a big man with scars on his hands and arms. He moved differently than the crystal beings. Where they flowed like water, he moved like a hunting cat, controlled, ready. Our methods are simpler, Nathan said. He drew a simple knife from his belt. We don't change matter. We just break things. The demonstration was brief and brutal. Nathan showed them how humans fought, not with beauty or coordination, but with violence that was designed to end threats quickly. He showed them locks and throws and strikes aimed at weak points. The princess watched in growing horror. This wasn't combat as the Xenothari understood it. This was designed to kill. Fast and ugly and final. Why do you fight so violently? She asked when Nathan was done. Because when something is trying to kill you, Nathan said, pretty doesn't work. Only winning matters. That evening, the princess walked alone in her private gardens. She couldn't stop thinking about the humans. They were smaller than Xenothari. They had no crystal powers. Their technology was simpler. But something about them made her feel afraid. She tried to understand the feeling. In 200 years of life, she had never been afraid of another living being. The Empire ruled through strength and wisdom. All species recognized their superiority and submitted peacefully. But these humans didn't submit. They didn't even seem impressed. When Captain Morrison looked at her, she felt like he was seeing something she didn't know about herself. Princess? She turned to see Dr. Crawford approaching. The human woman moved quietly like she was trying not to startle a frightened animal. Dr. Crawford, you walk softly. Old habit, Lisa said with a smile. On Earth, making noise can get you killed. There it was again. That casual mention of death and violence. The princess shivered. May I ask you something? Lisa said. Of course, Wing. When you look at Captain Morrison, what do you see? The princess thought carefully. I see someone who makes me feel small. But I don't understand why. He has no power, no crystal gifts. He's just a human. Lisa nodded slowly. Princess, can I tell you what Jake sees when he looks at you? What? He sees a beautiful, intelligent being who has never had to fight for her life. He sees someone who rules because she was born to rule. not because she earned it through struggle. And most importantly, yes, he sees someone who has never learned to be afraid. And that scares him because in his experience, only dead things aren't afraid of anything. The princess felt that shaking again, stronger than before. Are you saying he wants to hurt me? No, Lisa said gently. I'm saying he's trying to figure out if you're going to hurt him. And Jake has spent his whole life dealing with things that wanted to hurt him. He's very good at it. After Dr. Crawford left, the princess stood alone under the crystal stars. For the first time in her life, she wondered what it would be like to be prey. To be hunted by something smarter and more dangerous than herself. The thought made her crystal body tremble so hard that light flickered under her skin like lightning. Somewhere in the guest quarters, Captain Jake Morrison was awake too. He stood at his window looking out at the crystal city. In his mind, he was counting guards and mapping escape routes and calculating how long it would take human ships to reach this world. Not because he wanted to attack, but because Jake Morrison had learned long ago that the difference between predator and prey was often just a matter of who was better prepared, and humans were always prepared. The next morning brought new meetings between humans and Xanathari, but Princess Lyreley couldn't focus on the formal talks. She kept thinking about her conversation with Dr. Crawford. The words kept echoing in her crystal mind like songs that wouldn't stop. She decided to learn more about these strange humans. Instead of attending the trade discussions, she went to the training areas where Nathan Cross was working with Xanathari guards. Today we will show you advanced combat, announced Guard Captain Veltar Zephion. He was one of the Empire's finest warriors. His crystal armor could deflect energy weapons and his harmonic blade could cut through ship hulls. Nathan Cross stood in the center of the training circle. He wore only his simple human uniform and carried basic weapons. He looked small compared to the tall crystal beings around him. Captain Cross, Veltar said, we will demonstrate the difference between primitive and advanced combat techniques. Nathan smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Sure thing. The first exchange lasted 3 seconds. Veltar moved with fluid grace, his harmonic blade singing as it cut through the air. Nathan moved differently. He was fast, but not in a pretty way. He was fast like a snake striking. When the dust settled, Veltar was on the ground with Nathan's training knife at his throat. The crystal warrior's weapon was lying broken several feet away. How? Veltar gasped. You fight like you're performing, Nathan said, helping him up. Every move is designed to look impressive. But fighting isn't about looking good. It's about making the other guy stop moving. Princess Lyreley felt her crystal body start that trembling again. She watched Nathan demonstrate the same techniques on guard after guard. None of them could adapt to his style. They were all trained to fight other crystal beings who followed the same rules, but Nathan didn't follow any rules at all. Your Highness, said a voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. Crawford approaching. With Engineer Tony Rodriguez, Dr. Crawford, what brings you here? We wanted to understand your military better, Lisa said. How do you train your soldiers? We teach them harmony and precision, the princess replied. Combat should be an art form. Beautiful and controlled. Tony Rodriguez made a strange sound. It took the princess a moment to realize he was laughing. Something amuses you? She asked. Sorry, princess, Tony said. It's just where we come from. Combat is the opposite of beautiful. It's ugly and desperate and over as fast as possible. Why? Because if it lasts too long, you die, Tony explained simply. Dr. Crawford stepped closer. Princess, may I ask you something personal? What is it? Have you ever been truly afraid? Not worried or concerned, but afraid for your life? The princess thought about it. No, I don't think so. Why would I be afraid? I am Xanathari. We are the strongest beings in the galaxy. Lisa and Tony exchanged a look. Princess, Lisa said gently, Jake was afraid yesterday. Captain Morrison? Afraid of what? Of you, of your empire. Of what might happen if our peoples can't find a way to coexist. The princess felt confused. But we are offering friendship, alliance. Why would he fear that? Because Jake has studied your history, Tony explained. Every species you've encountered has joined your empire. None of them had a choice. They chose wisely, the princess said. We brought them peace and prosperity. Or you conquered them so completely they couldn't resist, Lisa said quietly. The words hit the princess like a harmonic blast. She staggered backward, her crystal skin flickering with confused patterns of light. That's not... We don't conquer, we guide, we lead. When you're strong enough that no one can say no, Tony said. What's the difference? That afternoon, Princess Lyrelei sought out Captain Morrison. She found him in the archives with Commander Blake studying records of the Empire's expansion. Captain Morrison, she said, may I speak with you privately? Jake looked up from the crystal data tablets. Of course, Princess. They walked to a quiet garden where light flowers bloomed in impossible colors. For a while, neither spoke. Your people study our history, the princess finally said. Yes. What do you think of it? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Princess, in the last 1,000 years, your empire has encountered 437 different species. All of them joined your empire within 10 years of first contact. Yes, we are very persuasive. Or very powerful, Jake said. Princess, what happened to the ones who said no? Said no to what? To joining your empire. To accepting your guidance. What happened to species that wanted to stay independent? The princess felt that trembling start again. I don't understand. No one has ever said no. Jake turned to look at her directly. When their eyes met, she felt like ice was forming in her crystal veins. Princess, he said slowly, that's exactly what scares me. That evening, the princess couldn't concentrate on her duties. She kept thinking about Captain Morrison's words. She went to the Central Archives and began searching through historical records. The Empire's expansion had indeed been peaceful. Every species had joined willingly. But as she dug deeper into the files, she started to notice patterns that disturbed her. Species that were strong militarily tended to join very quickly. Sometimes within days of first contact. Species that were weak took longer, but they always joined eventually. And in every case, the decision was made by their leaders after private meetings with Zenithari negotiators. She found recordings of some of these meetings. The alien leaders all said the same types of things. We recognize the wisdom of the Zenithari. Resistance would be foolish. Our people will be safer under your protection. But their voices sounded empty, defeated. Princess Lyrelei called up her personal tutor, an ancient Zenithari named Wisdom Keeper Lyron. Keeper, she said. When we make first contact with new species, what exactly do our negotiators tell them? The old crystal being's lights flickered thoughtfully. They explain the benefits of joining the Empire, young princess. Trade opportunities, protection from threats, access to our technology. And if they refuse? Refuse? Lyron seemed confused. But they never refuse. Once they understand the alternatives, they always see reason. What alternatives? The Wisdom Keeper's lights dimmed. Princess, some questions are not meant for young minds. The Empire has lasted 1,000 years because we are wise enough to make the hard choices that others cannot. That night, Princess Lyrelei couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the look in Captain Morrison's eyes. About the way his team moved like predators, even when they were being friendly. About the casual way they talked about death and violence and survival. She thought about Dr. Crawford's words. Only dead things aren't afraid of anything. And for the first time in her long life, Princess Lyrelei began to understand that there was a difference between ruling through strength and ruling through fear. Her empire hadn't conquered 437 species. It had simply been so obviously powerful that resistance seemed impossible. But what happened when you met someone who didn't think resistance was impossible? What happened when you met someone who had spent their entire evolutionary history learning to fight things bigger and stronger than themselves? What happened when predators met a bigger predator? The princess's crystal body shook so hard that her bed sang like a bell. Because she was starting to understand that Captain Morrison's steady gaze wasn't the look of someone evaluating an enemy. It was the look of someone who had already decided that if the Zenithari Empire was a threat to humanity, then the Zenithari Empire was going to die. And the most terrifying part was that she was beginning to believe he could do it. In his quarters across the palace, Jake Morrison sat awake reading reports that his team had gathered. Tony had mapped the weaknesses in Zenithari technology. Nathan had cataloged the flaws in their military training. Amanda had analyzed their economic structure. Lisa had studied their psychology. The picture that emerged was clear. The Zenithari Empire was powerful, but it was also fragile. It had never been tested by a real threat. Its people had never learned to fight for survival. Jake opened a secure communication to Earth. His message was short. Assessment complete. They're not prepared for war. Recommend proceeding with diplomatic option, but prepare contingencies. They're going to test us soon. Because Jake Morrison understood something that the princess was just beginning to learn. Predators always tested each other, and the test was coming whether anyone wanted it or not. The only question was who would survive it. The attack came at dawn on the 5th day. Princess Lyrelei was in her private chambers when the alarm started singing through the crystal walls. The sound was wrong. Not the gentle warnings she knew, but harsh, discordant notes that meant immediate danger. She rushed to her window and saw human ships falling from the sky in flames. But that was impossible. The humans only had one small diplomatic vessel. Where had the attacking ships come from? Her communication crystal activated. General Torvas Kethmore's face appeared in the light. "Princess, remain in your chambers," he commanded. "We are dealing with a human invasion force." "What? General, what are you talking about?" "The humans sent secret messages to their fleet while pretending to negotiate. They have been planning this attack from the beginning, but we detected their deception and struck first." Princess Lyrelei felt her crystal body go cold. "General, what have you done?" "What was necessary? The human threat has been eliminated." But even as he spoke, explosions echoed through the palace. The sounds were getting closer, not farther away. "General, if you destroyed their ships, what are those explosions?" Torvas looked confused. "Impossible. Our forces reported complete success. The humans are dead." The communication cut off suddenly. Princess Lyrelei ran through the crystal corridors toward the guest quarters, where the human delegation had been staying. She had to know what was happening. As she ran, she passed crystal guards running in the opposite direction. Their armor was cracked and their weapons were damaged. "What's happening?" She called to one of them. "The humans, Princess. They're still alive. They're fighting back." She reached the guest wing and stopped in shock. The beautiful crystal hallways were now a maze of broken walls and improvised barriers. Harmonic weapons lay scattered and broken on the floor. And moving through this destruction like ghosts were the 12 humans. Princess Lyrelei hid behind a crystal pillar and watched in growing horror. Captain Morrison was pressed against a wall, speaking quietly into a small device. "Amy, how many more coming from the east corridor?" "Sensors show 15, Captain," came the reply from Lieutenant Davis, who was somehow monitoring Xanathari communications. "Tony, are those charges ready?" 30 seconds, Jake," Tony Rodriguez called from somewhere the princess couldn't see. She watched Nathan Cross move through the wreckage like a hunting animal. He had taken weapons from fallen guards and somehow made them work for humans. Every movement was calculated and deadly. Dr. Crawford was tending to wounded Xanathari soldiers. Even in the middle of battle, she was trying to save lives. But the princess noticed that she was also questioning them, learning about guard positions and weapon capabilities. "Jake," Nathan called softly. "They're trying to flank us from the north. Permission to discourage them?" "Do it quietly," Jake replied. Nathan disappeared into the crystal maze. A few moments later, the princess heard sounds of combat from that direction. Then silence. This wasn't how war was supposed to work. The Xanathari had overwhelming numbers and superior technology. They should have crushed 12 humans in minutes. Instead, the humans were winning. "Princess." She spun around to find Commander Blake standing behind her. How had he gotten so close without her hearing him? "Commander Blake, what is happening?"
"Why are you fighting?"
"Your General Torvas attacked our ship while we were sleeping," Blake said calmly. He thought he was eliminating a threat. Instead, he just proved that the threat was real. "But there were only 12 of you." Blake smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. "Princess, 12 humans who expect to die can do a lot of damage before they're stopped." "Expect to die? But you're winning." "Are we?" Blake looked around at the destruction. "Princess, we're trapped in a hostile palace on an alien world. We have limited weapons and no way to escape. We're not trying to win. We're trying to make sure that attacking humans has a very high price." The princess felt that familiar trembling start again. "What do you mean?" "Every empire in the galaxy is watching this. They're waiting to see what happens when someone attacks humans. If we die easily, we look weak. If we die hard and take a lot of enemies with us, we look dangerous. But surely you could negotiate. Surrender. General Torvas is not unreasonable." Blake's expression grew colder. "Princess, your general just tried to murder a diplomatic mission in their sleep. From our perspective, negotiation time is over." An explosion echoed from deeper in the palace. Blake spoke into his communication device. "Jake, what was that?" Tony's surprise for the reinforcements, came the reply. We've got maybe an hour before they regroup and come at us with everything they have. Blake looked at the princess. Your Highness, you should leave. This area is about to become very dangerous, but the princess didn't leave. She followed Blake through the crystal maze, staying far enough back to avoid being seen by the other humans. She had to understand what was happening. She found Captain Morrison in what had been a beautiful reception hall. Now it was a fortress. The humans had used broken furniture and crystal debris to create defensive positions. They moved with practiced efficiency, like they had done this many times before. Status report, Jake said as his team gathered around him. East approach is blocked, Nathan reported. They'll need explosives to get through. Communications are jammed, but they're not using our frequencies, Amy Davis said. I can still reach our ship's emergency beacon. The ship that was destroyed? The princess whispered to herself. Tony, how many more surprises do we have? 3 big ones and a dozen small ones, Tony replied. But after that, we're down to basic weapons. Jake nodded. Lisa, what's the estimate on reinforcements? Based on palace layout and guard rotations, they can bring maybe 200 soldiers against us within an hour. After that, they can call in troops from the city. 200 against 12. The princess did the math and felt sick. Jake, Amanda Price said quietly, we've made our point. Earth will know what happened here. Maybe it's time to consider surrender. Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was calm and steady. Amanda, what do you think happens to humans who surrender to people who tried to murder them in their sleep? No one answered. We stick to the plan, Jake said. We make this cost them so much that no one will ever think attacking humans is a good idea. The princess watched in fascination and horror as the humans prepared for what they knew would be their final battle. They weren't angry or afraid. They were just professional, like this was a job they had been trained for. Princess Lyrelai. She spun around to find Dr. Crawford standing nearby. Dr. Crawford, how did you... We've known you were there for 10 minutes, Lisa said gently. Jake didn't want to frighten you away. Frighten me? I'm not afraid of you. Lisa looked at her sadly. Princess, 12 hours ago, your empire launched a surprise attack against sleeping diplomats. Now those diplomats have turned your palace into a war zone, and your elite guards can't stop them. If you're not afraid of us, you should be. The princess felt her crystal body start shaking again. But you're going to die. Even if you fight well, there are too many of us. Probably, Lisa agreed. But princess, do you understand what happens after we die? What do you mean? Earth is going to want to know what happened to us. And when they find out that the Zenithari Empire murders diplomats, they're going to be very upset. We can explain. This was General Torvus acting alone. Lisa shook her head. Princess, your general attacked us with Imperial ships using Imperial weapons while we were guests in the Imperial Palace. From our perspective, this was an official act of war. The full weight of what was happening crashed down on Princess Lyrelai like a falling crystal spire. This wasn't just 12 humans fighting for their lives. This was the beginning of something much larger and more terrible. Dr. Crawford, she whispered, when your people come for revenge, what will they do? Lisa was quiet for a moment. Princess, humans have a saying, don't start a fight you can't finish. Your empire just started a fight with a species that has been finishing fights for millions of years. In the distance, the princess could hear the sound of more explosions as General Torvas's forces regrouped for their final assault. Soon the 12 humans would be dead, but their death would be the seed of something that would shake the foundations of the Zenithari Empire. For the first time in 1,000 years, the galaxy's apex predator had found something more dangerous than itself, and it was coming for them all. The final assault never came. Princess Lyrelai was hiding behind a crystal barrier when she heard the strangest sound, General Torvas calling for a ceasefire. His voice echoed through the damaged palace halls, desperate and confused. Captain Morrison, we need to talk. Jake's voice came back calm and steady. General, the time for talking was before you tried to murder us in our sleep. Please. You have to listen to me. The princess crept closer to where Jake was positioned. She could see him now covered in crystal dust but unharmed. His eyes were still sharp and alert, like a predator that knew the hunt wasn't over. Jake, Dr. Crawford said quietly. Something's wrong. This doesn't feel like a trap. Nathan Cross appeared from his scouting position. Captain, you need to see this. They've pulled back all their forces. Everyone's just standing around looking confused. Jake frowned. Amy, are you picking up any communications? Lieutenant Davis pressed her hands to her monitoring equipment. Sir, I'm getting signals from orbit. Multiple ships arriving, big ones. The princess felt her crystal heart stop. More human ships? Jake looked at her. Princess, when did you last speak to your father, the Emperor? Yesterday morning. Why? Because I think he just found out what his general has been doing. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the halls. But these weren't the heavy boots of soldiers. These were the soft steps of crystal beings moving carefully, as if they were afraid of what they might find. Emperor Malthon Vashtar appeared at the entrance to the ruined hall. The ancient ruler looked older than the princess had ever seen him. Behind him walked General Torvus, whose crystal armor was cracked and dim. Captain Morrison, the Emperor said, his mind voice heavy with something the princess had never heard before. Fear. Jake stepped out from behind his defensive position, but his weapon remained ready. Your Majesty, I have just received communications from the human fleet that has arrived in our system, the Emperor continued. 47 warships. They are asking questions about the welfare of their diplomatic mission. The princess felt the world spin around her. 47 ships? How is that possible? Captain, the Emperor said, please help me understand what has happened here. Jake's expression didn't change. Your general launched a surprise attack on our delegation while we were sleeping. He destroyed our ship and attempted to kill us all. I was protecting the Empire. General Torvus burst out. The humans are a threat. They've been studying our weaknesses. Yes, Jake said simply. We have. The admission sent shockwaves through every Zenithari in the room. The princess felt her legs go weak. But, Jake continued, studying potential threats is what diplomats do. Acting on those studies without provocation is what we call an act of war. Emperor Malthon closed his ancient eyes. General Torvus, you have doomed us all. Doomed? The general sputtered. Father Emperor, there are only 12 of them. We can still... General, the Emperor said quietly. The human admiral who commands those 47 ships has informed me that they consider this attack to be a test of whether the Zenithari Empire can coexist with humanity, or whether it represents an existential threat that must be eliminated. The silence that followed was deafening. What did you tell them? Jake asked. I told them the truth, that General Torvus acted without my knowledge or approval, that he has been removed from command and will face judgment. And their response? The Emperor's crystal skin flickered with patterns of deep sadness. They said that the general's actions suggest that the Zenithari Empire's peaceful expansion was not as peaceful as we claimed. They want to discuss our relationship with the other species in our territory. Princess Lyrelei finally understood. The human fleet hadn't come for revenge. They had come for something much worse. They had come to audit the Empire's history, to discover the truth about how 437 species had all chosen to join peacefully. Captain Morrison, she said, stepping forward, what will your people do to us? Jake looked at her for a long moment. The Predator's gaze was still there, but now there was something else, something that might have been sadness. Princess, that depends on what we find when we start asking questions. Dr. Crawford moved to stand beside her captain. Your Majesty, we need access to your historical archives. Communication records. Trade agreements. Military deployment files. Everything, Jake added. And if we refuse? General Torvus demanded. Jake's smile was cold. General, you just tried to murder a diplomatic mission. Our fleet is already here. Refusing to cooperate would be unwise. You're invading us, the general shouted. No, Jake said quietly. We're conducting an investigation. But General, if we find what I think we're going to find, then invasion becomes an option. The Emperor sagged as if a great weight had fallen on him. What you think you will find? Evidence that your peaceful empire was built on threats and intimidation. That species joined you because they were terrified of what would happen if they didn't. That your expansion was conquest disguised as diplomacy. The Emperor said nothing. His silence was answer enough. 3 days later, Princess Lyrelei stood in the same crystal garden where she had first felt afraid of Captain Morrison. But now the garden was different. Human investigators moved through the palace like the predators they were, hunting for truth in ancient files. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. The Zenithari hadn't conquered through military force. They had conquered through demonstration. When they met a new species, they would show them recordings of other worlds. Worlds that had been accidentally destroyed by cosmic events. Worlds that had suffered mysterious plagues. Worlds that had simply vanished from all communications. The message was always subtle but clear. Join the Empire, or terrible things might happen to your world too. Most species chose to join. Princess. She turned to see Captain Morrison approaching. He looked tired but alert. In his hands were crystal data tablets filled with evidence that would reshape the galaxy. Captain, have you found what you were looking for? More than we wanted to, Jake said sadly. Princess, in the last 1,000 years, your empire has destroyed or depopulated 43 worlds. Not in war, just to make examples, to keep other species afraid. She felt that familiar trembling, but now she understood what it was. It was the recognition of a predator that had finally met something more dangerous than itself. What happens now? She whispered. Now we have to decide what to do with an empire built on fear, Jake said. And Princess, that decision isn't just up to us. Every species your empire has absorbed is going to have a voice in what comes next. Will you destroy us? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Princess, do you remember what you asked me that first day? Why I stared at you like that? Yes. I was trying to figure out if you were a threat that needed to be eliminated or a problem that could be solved. The empire your ancestors built? That's a threat. But you? He looked at her with those predator eyes, and for the first time she didn't feel afraid. You learned to be afraid, Princess. You learned to question. You learned to see the difference between ruling through strength and ruling through fear. That makes you something your empire has never had before. What's that? A chance at redemption. 6 months later, Princess Lyrelei stood before the Galactic Assembly, a new organization where every species had an equal voice. She was no longer heir to an empire. The Zenithari Empire had been dissolved, its military fleet divided among the species it had threatened for centuries. But she was something more important now. She was the first Zenithari ambassador to the new galactic government, a government where humans served as peacekeepers, making sure that no single species could ever again threaten all the others. Captain Morrison stood at the back of the assembly hall, watching. Their eyes met across the room, and Princess Lyrelei felt that familiar trembling one last time, but now she understood what it was. It wasn't fear of a predator. It was the excitement of knowing that the galaxy had finally found its balance, predator and prey, threat and protector, destroyer and builder, all working together to make sure that no species would ever again have to choose between submission and extinction. Jake Morrison smiled at her from across the room. It was still a predator's smile, but now it carried something else. Respect. And Princess Lyrelei smiled back, her crystal skin glowing with patterns of hope and determination. Because she had learned the most important lesson any ruler could learn. True strength wasn't about making others afraid of you. It was about making them glad you were on their side. The galaxy was finally safe. Not because the strongest had won, but because the strongest had chosen to protect instead of conquer. And in the end, that made all the difference.